Hello everyone! Welcome to another webinar promoted by SoftExpert. Today's event introduces how to create a high-performing internal audit team. The webinar will be conducted by Rawson, Vice President of the Dasara Group, with a broad history of leading and consulting with manufacturing, service, and R&D teams to define and improve processes that minimize waste and maximize customer satisfaction. I wish you all a great webinar.
Hello everyone, and welcome to How to Create a High-Performing Internal Audit Team. This is the newest webinar from the Dasara Group, and I'm very glad you've joined us today. My name is Rawson. I'm the Vice President of the Dasara Group, and I'll be presenting today. But before we get started, I wanted to share with you a little bit about who the Dasara Group is and what we do. We've been in business as a management system consulting group since 2008, and we don't just work with companies to start up their management system like ISO 9001 or TL 9000 or ISO 27001 and so forth, but we also do gap assessments, internal audits, supplier audits, investigations when things go wrong, and the only thing that one of the things that we don't do is certify companies. So that would be done by an accredited certification body such as NQA or DQS or BSI or a lot of the three-letter acronym names that you may be familiar with. We offer on-site and virtual instructor-led audit courses in addition to these webinars. And at the end of the class, at the end of today's session, I'll tell you a little bit about our upcoming virtual instructor-led audit program that's going to start in March. And I hope that if you have people in your company who need to get some training, that you can get them enrolled in that. It looks like somebody had a question right off the bat, so let me, it says has no sound. Okay, would you please raise your hand if you can hear me now using the hand raise panel on the GoToWebinar? Yep, I'm seeing lots of hands up, so that's very good. So I'm going to put all the hands down now, and I'm glad to see that somebody already started us off with how to ask a question. You know, you can put your questions in as we go through this webinar. Just type them in and we'll answer it at the end, or I'll see them on my panel, and if I can work it in right then, I will. I've been known to think I've said something when I haven't already said it, and some good questions often come in. Our agenda for today is really to focus on what does it take to create a high-performing internal audit team. And it starts with who should be on the team and making sure that they get the training and competence that they need. Then we'll talk about measuring and improving the internal audit process and giving feedback to the auditors so that they can improve. We'll end up with 7 ways to nurture the team, and I hope that what you'll be doing as you go through this presentation is take some notes on things that you say, we could be doing that right now. Why aren't we doing that already? I can do that with just what I have where I am with no additional budget or permission. The one thing that that attending a webinar is just so much infotainment if you don't leave it with something that you can put to use right away. Now, you will get a copy of the presentation. You can download it right now on the handouts tab of the control panel, but you'll also get a copy of the recorded presentation tomorrow. You'll get an email with a link to that. And what some folks like to do, I've heard, is play this for their teams, or part of it for their teams, as a way of stimulating discussion. If you use this for CPEs, for ASQ, or any other certifications, they will accept if you just have the that thing that says thank you for attending, and it's very good if you attach a copy of the presentation to your records so that you can always go back to it and say, yeah, this is what I learned. We don't issue certificates, but you do get that automatic email that says that you were actually here. And if you're listening to this on the recording, you'll also get the response that you got the recording, or get in touch with me if you need something else. Well, why are we even talking about the internal audit program? For a lot of companies, it's just business as usual. They've been doing audits for years, but I just want to reinforce the importance of the internal audit program. Auditors are the eyes and ears of the management team and the voice of the people working in processes. If you have an undetected process error, then somebody's probably going to have done some sort of workaround. They're doing something that's not the way the process was set up to work. Maybe the process was set up badly in the first place, or maybe they're just losing productivity by reinventing the wheel as to how it ought to be done. But in any case, if there's an undetected process error, it's likely that there are also undetected problems that are leading to dissatisfied customers. And sadly, though they may not tell you why, it opens you up to losing that business to a competitor. Your management team needs to understand the importance of an internal audit program is to hit that tip of the iceberg, because you don't want that baseline there at the bottom. But they're only going to believe in the audit program if you have a high-performing team that's bringing in valuable information or valuable verification that things are going well. What no manager wants to see is quality problems coming in from the field or information security breaches coming in from customers, and say, well, why are we passing our audits with flying colors? And I'll tell you, that's something that happens when Desera Group goes in and does internal audits for a company. They can look at their internal audits year in and year out and see that they've detected things like, documents not signed, or material not where it's supposed to be, or something, but it's never connected to the big picture of what are the undetected problems that this is leading to, or where is the productivity being lost to make up for this. When Desera comes in to do internal audits, we're actually, and we teach this to guide your people to look for what's the impact of the finding that you're just writing down. If it's simply that, it could be done way A or way B, and way A is in the procedure, well, either change the procedure and allow the other way, or figure out if there's an optimal way that something should be done. Link up your findings to what does it really mean to the business. One little audience participation here. Raise your hand if you're having one or more of these challenges that with your auditor effectiveness, and it's what I call often winds up with a blind leading the blind. And I hope that I guess I hope that most of these are not relevant, but in a way I hope they are, because if you're on this call, you're looking for something that can help you improve. The first thing is getting the right people committed to perform audits. Some companies are lucky enough to have a dedicated internal audit team where people are auditing all throughout the year. They have a lot of experience and they're very strong at what they do. And yet they might benefit from having some diversity added onto their team as well. And they can't get those volunteers to add on because it's not part of anyone's job. So do you raise your hand if you feel like you maybe don't have the right people committed to performing audits? And that includes people assigned who aren't committed. The second thing is if the people who are performing the audits don't have a high standard set for them for what is it they need to know how to do, be able to do, and actually produce when they perform audits and write audit reports and close them. Does your team have high standards? Raise your hand if that's a challenge to your effectiveness. And then getting minimal feedback, that auditors get minimal feedback in some companies from management, from the certification body, or from their auditees. They simply do their audit, and if no one complains, they figure they've done a pretty good job. If they do it on time, they figure they've done a pretty good job. And they're not getting, hey, here's a way that you could actually improve. So raise your hand if you have a problem with auditor effectiveness like that. And then finally, the blind leading the blind, that we've always done it this way, that's good enough. Often companies I've seen have gone for many years after the first group of auditors had professional training, that then they just bring people on through OJT, and people don't really understand the theory behind what it is they were actually learning. So I would, let me look here and see how people are saying these are the things that we're having. Oh, I see lots of hands going up. Yeah, a lot of different people have seen things like this in their companies, and hopefully nobody's seen all of those. And we'll address some of these in the presentation, how to get the right people committed and how to set high standards and get feedback and really build a high-performing team. Well, I'm a big reader, and I like the book Good to Great from Jim Collins back, I think it was written probably 20 years ago, and it's still a perennial bestseller. Jim Collins said, it's better to first get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, and the right people in the right seats, and then figure out where to drive. And that goes for audit programs as well. Who before how. So who should be on your bus on the internal audit team? Well, ISO 9001 doesn't say a lot, and the other standards mirror these words, if not exactly, but they don't give you a lot. They say you have to have an audit program where you select auditors and conduct audits to ensure objectivity and impartiality of the audit process. So you can't audit your own work. So you're going to need at least more than one auditor in the company, because the person running the audit program can't audit the audit program. In fact, that's one of the ways that DeSera actually gets involved with clients, is talking about, how's your internal audit program going? Who audits it? People sometimes get feedback from their CB auditor that no one's audited the audit process itself. Well, to start with getting the right people on the bus, how do you get the right people? Well, you need people with the career knowledge and experience to be able to look at a process and understand what's going on there. You wouldn't send somebody who's not knowledgeable of a production process anywhere in production, anywhere in engineering, out to audit that process any more than you would send an assembler from third shift in to audit the financial records of the company. You need people with the knowledge and experience, though not auditing their own work, which means you're going to need a variety of people. Only having quality professionals on your audit team who don't have a background in different kinds of processes leaves gaps in what they may be able to understand and follow through with on their audits. You need people with curiosity and enthusiasm. Auditors who come in dragging their heels like, oh my goodness, I got to make time to do this audit now, are not going to be the most effective auditors on a high-performing team. I have worked with a company down in Florida where they pretty much put, within your first 3 years with a company, and they do promote from within, it's like getting your ticket stamped. You're going to spend 2 or 3 years being an internal auditor, and you can put more into it if you'd like, but everybody's going to go through the training sometime within their first 3 years and do a number of audits so that they really understand a lot more about how the company works, and people are enthusiastic about their turn to go to the training and get to be a part of the audit team. Next, conscientiousness. Now, we'll talk about conscientiousness in a little while, in a little more detail, but what I'm saying is, on your audit team, you can't have people who just want to pencil whip the documents and get through the audit, nor can you have people who simply want to analyze every last blade of grass. They need to be able to look at both the forest and the trees and not get stuck down in the weeds, to mix my metaphors up a little bit there. You need a mix of conscientiousness, some people who see a lot of big picture, some people who are going to hold your feet to the fire and be sure that you capture adequate evidence to repeat your repeat your findings, to verify your findings that you have. You need people with good communication skills. Now, good communication skills means your verbal skills, the ability to interview people as well as write down things that belong in a report, and also the ability to communicate with team members, be able to share your analysis over ideas. Don't be afraid to speak your mind. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be afraid to not know something. Now, communication may also mean that you need to include some people in your audit team that speak the different languages of the people you might interview. It would be sad to go through an audit cycle and have some people who never get asked questions about their process simply because no one on the audit team can either work with a translator or speak the language of the people who are comfortable answering questions in that language. It's a fact of life in our diverse society. Whether you're working internationally or even locally, you could practically have a dozen different languages in some companies I've seen that where you need to have different kinds of communication skills. That doesn't mean that somebody with poor written skills or poor spelling, on that conscientiousness part, isn't a suitable auditor. You just have to have auditors who can complement one another's skills. And that's what I mean by diversity, having a range of people that complements one another's differences with respect to career knowledge and experience, in their conscientiousness, communication skills, and their experience with auditing. So who should be on the internal audit team? To get more specific, we certainly want our experienced auditors. These are the people who understand the standard that we're auditing to and who can leverage their understanding of a management system to drive continual improvement in the business and on the team. They're the ones we rely on often to coach and develop newer auditors on using the audit process, on properly documenting findings, on methods used for planning and conducting audits, coaching them on how to ask open-ended questions and so forth. But we get into trouble when everybody on the audit team sort of has the same perspective and the same experience. So for that reason, it's a good idea to include a number of individual contributors who have knowledge of the day-to-day issues, but may not truly have much background at all in what is a management system. They look at a management system as, well, I follow the guidelines that are laid out for me on the job, but I don't know, that it's related to a standard. Well, when they become auditors, they'll learn about the standard, but they bring with them a lot of knowledge of the day-to-day issues. Like you get somebody from product development who's working on, one type of hardware, and they go over and audit a development process working on something else that they didn't actually work on that project. They're a great member of that audit team because they know where the bodies lie. Individual contributors have an awesome opportunity when they join the audit program for learning and exposure to what goes on in the business and who else have they maybe only ever seen in the break room and they don't really know what that person does. So contributors often bring a lot of enthusiasm and conscientiousness to the audit process because they want to learn and do it right, and they're curious about what goes on. Auditors, as individual contributors in the audit team, will see things that maybe they're not doing so well within their function, and they take that back into their area. They bring ideas back, and they maybe are able to carry ideas forward to other groups as saying, hey, it would really help us if you would do this, or our department has this idea that helps with that problem that you're having. So it's a great idea to have a number of individual contributors because they tend to really enjoy it and enjoy the chance to contribute and do something different than their day-to-day job. Process owners and subject matter experts should be on the internal audit team. And I don't just mean the process owner of the quality function or of the information security function processes, or I mean people who are typically the ones who get audited. The people who get audited and are often so busy in so many meetings that they're going to be hard pressed to find the time to plan and conduct and write reports and follow up on closing audits. This is why you want diversity on the audit team. They may not be the people who are doing the bulk of the planning, but turn them loose in execution, and they go out there and they focus on what's important to the business. They focus on things that they know are risks, that they know have been past problems. And while they can't assess their own process because they own the whole process, it's a great idea to have them audit the process upstream or downstream from where they are. I remember once taking somebody from a process owner from the development function out to the production floor. This was way back in the day of hard copy drawings on the floor. And she said, why do you guys not have the most up-to-date drawings out here? We issued a change to this last month. Didn't you just go into the system and pull it out? That's what the memos always say. And the people on the floor said, well, we don't even have access to that system. We've always had them sent to us in the past. And it was a process change that development made that hadn't gotten all the way through to production, that development manager went back and made sure was executed right away, because it was a simple problem to fix that just one side didn't know what the other side was doing. That's an excellent reason for having process owners involved. They think they know how things are working. They think they know how their internal suppliers and downstream customers are doing, but they may find some very eye-opening material when they actually go out there to audit and interview people. Also, when they see a problem, there's some authority behind it, or when they've participated in an audit, their perspective says, yes, this process owner is holding his or her peer process owner responsible for making a change. Now, I'll tell you, when I was managing a department, I really did not like having somebody from outside my area point out a problem in an audit. We wanted to find anything like that ourselves internally. So it kept us on our toes knowing somebody at my level or above my level was going to be conducting the audit. So it's really important to engage the process owners. You may not get them to do many audits in the course of a year, but if you make it just a small part of that, they just come in and work on the audit and maybe go over the audit report when it's done. They show them how valuable it is. Hopefully you'll be able to get those people on the audit team as well. And for those very same reasons, you want to get senior leaders involved. Later on, we're going to be talking about resourcing for the internal audit team. And when a senior leader has seen firsthand what goes on out there, they will be more likely to understand why the team wants time for meetings, or wants to bring in professional training, or wants to bring in an outsider to do some or all of the internal audits for a cycle. You see, they care. Senior leaders really count on the audit team, or should be able to count on it, and maybe don't think they can be able to count on the audit team for insight into the risks to cost, quality, speed, and customer satisfaction. When they see that that's what you're looking at, and when they're able to relate to what you've done in an audit, you're much more likely to have them hold people accountable for completing audit, for addressing audit nonconformities, and for having their areas in shape for audits that come around. Senior leaders often really enjoy being a part of an audit team, not doing the detailed planning and going through the standard and the nuts and bolts that subject matter experts and experienced auditors can do much more quickly. But they do enjoy being out and listening to people that they otherwise wouldn't see on a day-to-day basis. They enjoy engaging with people with diverse viewpoints. On the last webinar I gave, I couldn't think of the name, and it was called layered process audits. Layered process audits are required in the automotive industry, and that refers specifically to production audits, where the supervisor audits daily and the manager audits weekly, and the plant manager comes around once a month to different departments and looks at some of those daily audit checks. Well, you can do the same thing with your overall business process audits. Include the senior leaders in a variety of the audits, not necessarily on every process audit that you do, but get them involved in a mix, because when they're asked to, and when it's not intrusive on their time, because you really worked around their schedule, they're such valuable additions to the audit team. And then what all of that boils down to, who should be on the internal audit team? It's the diversity. Make sure you have diversity across role and function and level and years with the company. Make sure you have diversity in terms of people who really know the standard and people who are just learning it and will take those learnings back into the job. And make sure that you have a diversity of personal traits, because those people with differing points of view and different levels of skills in communication and analysis and so forth will learn from one another, and it'll become a very enriching part of their year to be involved in the internal audit process, rather than something that they have to just get done because somebody voluntold them that they would do so. Okay, so that's getting the right people on the bus, getting them in the right seats. And now we have to be sure that we figure out what needs to be done and make sure that they're capable of doing it. Well, competence is a mix of attitude, skills, and knowledge. So hopefully you have, through the selection process, gotten the right attitude and a good portion of the knowledge that you need. So now let's talk about ensuring competence of auditors. ISO 9001 and the other standards that have practically these same words in them, they don't give you a whole lot to go on. It says the organization shall determine the necessary competence of people that affect the performance and effectiveness of the management system. Well, auditors certainly affect the performance and effectiveness by, as I said, undetected process errors will lead to undetected problems that actually hit the customers. So you definitely need to address the competence of auditors, and it says you shall do it on the basis of appropriate education, training, or experience, and evaluate the effectiveness of the actions taken to develop that competence. Well, a typical auditor competence path that I've seen in a lot of the companies that I've gone into is that the first group of people who ever audited with the company get a 3-day classroom training program. Sit through the classroom, maybe they went off site to go to training, maybe they had a trainer come in, and then they come back in and either train other auditors after they've had some experience, or maybe there's some videos and so forth that they can go through. They've certainly written procedures and templates and tools that people are supposed to be able to read. And then the ever-present on-the-job training, which is so important for auditors. You don't learn how to audit, you learn what to do in an audit and in an audit classroom, and you practice a little bit in a lab environment about how to do it. But it's truly the on-the-job training that makes that classroom training sink in. The issue is when you've got, like I said at the beginning, the 3 blind mice. If the last time professional training with experts was done was years ago, you may have some things. In fact, I have several clients that have ongoing refresher training for their senior auditors. So somebody who went through audit training one year, then maybe 3-4 years later, they're invited to the refresher training class if they're going to continue on as auditors after their commitments up. And when we go through the standard again, and when we go through some of the techniques again, they're just really grateful. It may be even some of the same slides they saw before, but they're like, man, I hadn't thought of it in that way before. That's really good. So refresher training for your following the 3-day class is really important. I call it like putting a kid through driver training school, and that, just the ground school, and then maybe behind the wheel with a trainer for a little bit, and then say, okay, drive yourself through New York City. You know the rules. There's only so much that somebody who's just had the classroom training and a chance to follow someone along is really able to do on their own. Let's see, I have a couple of questions that just came in. Let me see. Yeah, it says, where do you get the self-paced videos and reading procedures? Those would be things that would be internally developed by the company itself. That's often something that's slide sets that maybe the person or people who went to the 3-day classroom training put together, and then they put it out on their learning portal for people to go through those. And yes, they have some expertise. They've been auditing for a while, and yet it's tough to do. I know one company that puts out a 4-hour, this is not a client, this is a training, it's actually a certification body that puts out a 4-hour self-paced video, how to conduct audits training class. And that may be a good refresher training for somebody. If it's all somebody gets to start auditing, I'm concerned that something that's that short really wouldn't have enough depth into going into the audit standard. I will talk later about the courses that we have, and we do have a refresher course that we offer. We call it the Advanced Internal Auditor Skills course. We also have an Audit Program Manager course. Okay, next on typical auditor competence, often it's partnering with an experienced auditor if someone is available, and sometimes that partner, experienced auditor, is not the best trainer. How do they know what to train on? Is it just somebody following me along? What am I supposed to make sure they have? If they're simply handed a checklist saying, you've been through training, now go execute this checklist, they might as well hand the checklist to the auditee and ask the auditee to fill it out. Because often those checklists that I've seen that have been handed to new auditors, and I do have a couple of clients who have done an excellent job on creating checklist libraries that aren't simply, do they do this, do they do that, do they do the other thing with a yes, no checkbox, but really checklists that have some details of what to look at and what to look for. Handing a new auditor a checklist is worse than giving them nothing at all, because they go out there thinking they've done what they were supposed to do, and it's too little to go on to understand. They need to, well, we'll talk a little bit later about how to work them through some of that early training. When I've asked in some companies my experienced auditors that come to refresher training, I say, how many audits do you do a year? These would be the volunteer auditors who have complete other jobs to do, and they may only audit 1 or 2, 3 or 4 processes per year, because maybe there are 6 or 8 auditors and they've got 15 processes and everybody takes a couple of them. Well, it would be a lot more effective to audit in groups of 3 and have everybody do 4 or more audits in the course of a year, at least following along, where maybe you're responsible for 1 or 2 yourself. You got to stay in practice for auditing. It's not something that somebody's going to get if they simply have training and wait 3 or 4 months before they ever do an audit. Now, for competence, I've seen people hang certificates from my company in their office, and they say, well, I'm a certified internal auditor. And to that, I would say, you demonstrated the competence to get a certificate from the class that said that you took in the information and were able to demonstrate in a laboratory level what you did. Passing a test on a class does not make a certified auditor, but if that's what the company relies on in its definition of what does it take to be certified, they're really selling the evaluation process short. Just simply passing a test, completing reports, or maybe getting a little bit of verbal feedback is probably inadequate for checking the competence of an auditor. Like any process, the audit process needs competent people. They need to know how to plan and collect evidence and document findings and close an audit, and you need to evaluate their ability to do that. They also need to know how to use the internal tools and templates and reporting structures and scheduling and all the company culture stuff that they need to be able to do to make sure that their findings actually get action. And then, of course, they need to come in with a baseline competency that we discussed. But a high-performing team develops and refines its methods for onboarding those new auditors and leveraging the skills of the best performers to continually upgrade team performance. And that's what we're going to do in the rest of this presentation, is talk about how do we actually ensure auditor competence and engage people in a high-performing way. For training, you should be looking at the training class. Is it extensive enough? And is it delivered right before the person has a chance to use it? Because if they go to a class and they're not assigned an audit for 6 months, it's unlikely they'll remember very much of it. So when DeSera teaches on-site training, we almost always, I should say, it's just, I don't know anybody who doesn't, have the lab on the other end of it. So we do the 3-day classroom training where instead of simply being laboratory exercises, case studies, they're actually working on what would it take to audit a process in their business. And then suppose we have 10 people in class. They go out in groups of 3 or 4, maybe 3 groups of 3 or 4, and they each audit a different process. We critique their audit plan, they conduct the audit, and then they come back in and they critique each other's audit report. They write up their nonconformances and they critique each other's audit reports. And at the very end of the day, the process owners and leadership, the people who were interviewed in the audits, can come in and listen to a closing meeting, so they get practice actually presenting their ideas and getting the feedback from people. When you do that, then you know what the learner in a class is capable of doing after the class. If somebody just sits through videos or follows along with someone, there's really no evaluation of how well they've done. Now, the mentors that you use, the experienced auditors who are helping others, good idea to qualify those mentors. For one mentor may be passing along some poor practices or saying, oh, you don't really need to do that, or that's not the way I really do it. What they showed you in class isn't necessarily what you do. So you want to be sure that the mentors are getting them off on the right foot and making sure that any tools that they're using are just guiding them, not giving them a check the box exercise. That's one of my hot buttons, is when somebody's just given a yes/no checklist. Before you can say that an auditor has competence to go out and lead an audit, you need to see that they've demonstrated the necessary skills across a variety of situations. Can they only audit one department, or have you seen them do it in multiple environments? And have they done it enough to retain the learning? So then you can finally perform an evaluation. But a high-performing team has developed its high standards, has developed its criteria. And when you pass an audit, it may be by consensus of the team that you get your gold star, or whatever it may be. One of my favorite teams that did this was an all hourly employee-led process audit team. That it was an honor to get to be on that team, to get to be one of the designated auditors. Now, you could follow along, but you weren't a designated auditor until the team deemed you competent. It was a highly self-directed work team. If you have poor performers, people who don't take to it, people who don't like it, make sure that you're not forcing them to do audits, because you just won't get what you need. Now, for beyond the basic training, when you're mentoring new auditors, I really recommend putting them in small groups with an expert mentor who will reinforce those skills. Just like I was saying, we do on the audit lab day after the 3-day training class. You want to do this as soon as possible after any training that you've delivered to them, so that they get to practice the skills that they got, where they study the process, they identify the measurements and risks, they look at the trends, they learn to question the process owner as well as the people working in the process on what's changed around here that could influence whether we're following our processes and getting the results that they want. As a team, they should come up with a checklist. When I tell them, I want you to come up with 20 different things that you want to look at and what you expect to verify and who you're going to find that information from, when I tell them to create 20 questions, people's eyes bug out. They're like, 20 questions? There's only 2 clauses that apply to this process. I'm like, well, look at it again. And lo and behold, working together with a mentor, they are able to come up with all the different things that an auditor should be looking at and observing, not just asking checklist questions about. And then once the new auditors have gathered evidence and prepared reports, whether they've been observed doing the collection and write-up, the mentor should send them out to collect additional evidence if needed and make sure that those reports are giving actionable feedback with a so what, with a why is this important to the business, not just I found an unsigned document. Okay, so if we've got people who are enthusiastic about being on the audit team, they've been trained, they're going out and doing audits, the way you keep a high-performing team is you continually raise the bar. You set higher and higher standards. You get people who really want to be there and make a process that works and that they're proud of. I kind of liken this to my church in town is pretty big, and for years and years, the singers, the choir was kind of mediocre. And I looked at it and I thought, out of over thousands of people who attend here, is this really the best we can do? And the issue was that the choir director really wasn't holding them to a very high standard. It was like, show up before the service and we'll practice through things and we'll sing together. Down the street, well, actually a city away, a church much smaller that had a choir director that had a very high standard and attracted more people than this huge church had because of the high standard. People want to participate on a winning team. So let me ask you guys by show of hands that we did before, does your audit, I took all the hands down, so this will be new hands. Raise your hand on the panel if you say that your audit program has ways of monitoring and improving its process. Raise your hand if you're good at it. These are the kinds of things that I see companies typically monitoring. They monitor on-time completion of audit reports and how many non-conformances were found and were there repeat findings. Now, I really don't like it when the number of non-conformances found is a measure, because what's the target? Do we want to find lots of them? Do we want to find none of them? Do we want to find an average number? Because I guarantee you, whatever number you say you want to find, you'll find that number. If it's supposed to increase from last year or decrease from last year, that's what it'll do, because auditors can write up findings as opportunities for improvement when they actually should be findings, or they can take a major and turn it into a minor. They can group things together to make them a major instead of calling them out individually and writing up a bunch of minors. I've even heard certification body auditors talk to the quality manager in some cases and say, well, here's what I found. If I make it a major, here's what happens. If I make it a minor, here's what happens. Which way do you want me to write it up? So that's not a whole lot of objectivity. Internal auditors should not be going to the auditee and saying, how do you want me to write this up? But working with their peers on what is our standard? What is our standard for what do we write up? And how much evidence does it take to make something a non-conformance? Do I write up every little last nit that I find, or do I group things together and see if there's a trend? So those typical monitoring items, I think it's important to get on time, but where does it say, did we actually do a good job of what we did? I think these are some better ways of monitoring the process, and they're things that you as a team can hold yourself to with no additional budget from anyone, no additional responsibilities or procedures or anything. You can just say, we're going to start doing focus groups with auditees and managers that we've audited. We're going to get feedback from internal auditors. Remember, that's why I said you want a diverse team of internal auditors, is because some people will be able to say, well, when I was at another company, this worked really well. Or, we said we were going to do ABC this year and we haven't done it after all. So getting feedback from your own internal auditors is one way to improve the process. And these are not measures, they are monitoring. But if you keep a log of the ideas that come up, kind of the OFIs for your own process, that's very important. I think one thing that you can measure is participation by function and level. Keep a grid that says which functions are coughing up the volunteer auditors and what levels of people are participating. We may be having so many individual contributors, and we really want to bring in some managers and process owners and even senior leaders. Not every senior leader is going to get involved in the audit process. Good luck trying to get a sales director to come in, but you ought to be able to get some people that at the higher levels to come in and participate. And then look at feedback on your continuing education opportunities to see. Some people go to ASQ meetings, and some people go to webinars, and some people have their own internal audit team members or process owners present lunch and learns and things like that. So there are many different kinds of continual education opportunities that you may have, and we'll talk about a few more of them in a minute. Let's see, what did we get for how people are doing their evaluation? I said, raise your hand if you do have good evaluation, and that's a much smaller number than we had before who said that they have issues. Okay, I'm going to take hands down. So I think I have another question. So how does your internal audit team work together to improve performance? This is building on those ideas that we just had on the last couple of slides about training and competence and measurement. Teamwork drives high performance, like I said, with a choir that sets high standards. One of the things I've seen teams do is present their audit reports to their own team before or after they've presented it to the management of the area affected. But when you have to stand up and present your audit report to a team and they give you feedback on it, it's wonderful because they say, oh, there are follow-on audit trails. I found that same kind of thing. Or, oh, I'm going to look at that when I go out because I'll bet this other department has similar types of issues. Or if that problem started in this department, maybe another department's also affected by it. Another idea for having teamwork is, I talked about don't have these standard checklists that just say regurgitate a clause and say yes or no on it. Continually improve your library of those audit plans and checklists. An auditor ought to be able to look at what was audited in the past and build on that, and not just interview the same people with the same points of reference, but rather build on it and say where else are some risks. A high-performing team analyzes itself and says, what are we learning? What are we doing well? What do we want to do differently? So keep that list of good practices and lessons learned and review it regularly with the team. Honestly, if you had a monthly meeting or certainly a quarterly meeting with your audit team, you would have more than enough stuff to discuss just on getting better at auditing by doing these types of things, so that you build those learnings into the standard ways of working as an audit team. And these are not above and beyond. These are things that I've seen high-performing audit teams do with each other. Now, I'm not talking about audit teams with 30 or 40 people on them, though there are those. I'm talking about groups of 3 or 4 people in a small company that these people meet together and they go over, what are we doing well? What do we want to be doing differently? Where do we need continuing ed? So definitely continue learning through rotating those roles and through mentoring. Don't expect that once somebody's had a 3-day class or gone through their first 3 or 4 audits and been signed off, that they're good to go. Use your audit team meetings as a chance to learn together, bring stuff back from webinars and conferences and such that you attend. But you can certainly find things to get educated on that really matter to the team just by polling the team on what's working well. All right, I think auditors really need feedback individually as well as a team to get better. They're going to get mentoring in real time if you set them up that way, and have that happen over a period of time, and sometimes have those mentors rotate around among different audit groups if you have multiple teams where people aren't auditing very frequently. Make sure they're effectively planning and reporting. Have a post report with the process owner. Ask the process owner, what did that person think of the audit that they received? Did it go deeply enough? Did it address the areas that they thought were concerns? Did the auditor understand and give them a thorough and fair audit? And how did the audit progress? In your monthly or quarterly team discussions, if you're reviewing different people's audit reports or audit plans, they will get peer-to-peer feedback, and they will get better at writing and speaking and communicating about excuse me, reports and follow-on trails. If your management team is, say, having semi-annual management reviews for the management system, or if they can be invited to come into your audit team meetings once or twice a year, invite them to come in and talk about the value of the overall process and results. That would be a great thing for if you have some senior leaders who have participated in 1 or more audits during the course of the year. They can come back in and share with the entire team what they got out of it and what they'd like to see done differently. So that's some feedback, but how about continuing education? I said that's one of the ways to evaluate your team's effectiveness, to monitor whether we're doing the right things to become a high-performing team. Well, there are a lot of things that you can do that may or may not cost money. Internal workshops and briefings. If you can come up with the periodic meeting times, even if you have to do it across shifts or across, I do a lot of video meetings with groups, and what you guys hear, I'm preaching to the choir, those of you who have come on the line to be a part of a webinar. Some of these things are free or very low cost. Here in Fort Worth, the ASQ, I guess it doesn't go by its initials, but the Quality Association, and then there's the SANS Institute, and there are various professional associations that have conferences that are local, that don't cost a lot to go to, just the time away from work and maybe a nominal admission fee. If you're lucky enough to get to go to some of the national conferences, those can be excellent. Pick and choose the sessions that you go to. But if you are the ones that get to go to those, be sure that you bring them back into internal workshops and briefings. I believe that mentors, your more experienced auditors, the people who've been working at it for a few years, should have advanced training. And like I said, we do offer a class in that. You may have people within your company who are capable of developing and presenting that training. That training for mentors ought to be highly participative. That's where you actually pull out records of things that have been done in your audit program and done particularly well, and some that could have been done better. And you really talk among that mentor group what you need to do. Sometimes a program manager has been put into the job of managing an audit program without ever having any specialized training for what is the management system, how does it work, what is a third-party auditor, how does the third-party audit process work, and so forth. They've just sort of rotated into that position from another role. I know one company, it's almost like you got to get your ticket punched to go, and you go through their, do a 2-year stint as a program manager. Well, if they're turning over program managers every other year, it's hard to say whether those people ever really pass along the tribal knowledge, and they would do well to have specialized training. Sarah is offering, and it'll probably only be offered quarterly, but a specialized program manager training. I've got it on the schedule for every month, but we'll probably wind up consolidating those in the future because there's a far smaller audience. But what you need to do when you're planning for continual education is make it known to this program manager and or her manager who's got budgetary responsibility need to put this into annual planning. It may involve taking people who are reporting their time to project basis, or who are reporting their time in an hourly capacity, to allow time for participating in continuing education. Or it may be that you allocate for some professional associations or for some conferences. And yes, those are usually the first thing to get cut, but you're not going to get them if you don't ask for them. So make sure that it's that you don't just throw your auditors out there without any continuing education and just expect them one time through the training, a little bit of mentoring, you're good to go. You'll have a higher performing audit team if you share in the learning. Management commitment is what I just said there is a sore spot with a lot of people. That idea of, well, sure, we'd love to go to conferences. We'd love to have all the time in the world to do audits, but we've got real jobs to do. And that's one of the reasons you want to include managers in the audit process, top managers who make the financial decisions, because they'll get better results out of the audit program. They make the decisions about the resources, who's involved, how much time and money is spent. And furthermore, they make the decisions about how do we hold people accountable for closing audit findings. That's probably the biggest thorn in the side of somebody who's gone out and done what they believe to be a thorough audit and found something meaningful, that people don't actually take the corrective action. Or for an audit program manager who's got auditors who have signed up and have taken training and committed to audit, but then something always comes up and they're late doing their audits and everything is jammed up at the end. Management could make decisions about, for example, having once every 3 years somebody, or even for certain processes every year, have somebody like the DeSera group come in and contract your internal audits, because you're going to get deeper dive. And sure, maybe the outsiders won't know where the bodies lie, but they don't have the same blind spots that internal auditors have. But those things take time, and they take some money in some cases. So what can you do from within your own sphere of influence? I use this graphic of this photo of second chair. Look at second chair over here, scowling. First chair, he's real happy. I get to lead the whole orchestra. Second chair over here, she's like, yeah, well, I'm as good. Not really. I felt that way when I was in high school band sometimes, though. But the deal is the concertmaster and the orchestra is working hand in hand with the conductor to lead the string section. But this person over here, through sheer influence of, I mean, not fighting against, but moving with the leadership, can support and expand on what the leaders are doing. Benjamin Zander and Rosalind Zander wrote a book 10 years ago or so called The Art of Possibility. It's one of my favorite books. I have it on the shelf over there. And that's one of his chapters, Leading from Any Chair. Rather than saying, well, we don't have the money for that, look at the ideas in this presentation and say, what could I do even if I don't have any additional budget or time? And to bring this to a close, let's talk about the 7 ways to nurture a high-performing team. One more question here. Yes, the question was, before I move on, it was, do you have a class or course that helps to better define what each clause means? That's what a good 3-day internal audit class starts with, because before you can go out and do an audit, you need to understand the standard that you're auditing to. So solid internal audit class takes a march through whatever standard would be the criteria you're looking at and says, this is what this means, and this is what you should be looking at and looking for in your audit process to see if these are fulfilled. It teaches people to say, where do these different clauses apply? So when we do that in an internal audit class, we have a number of exercises that cause people to not just read the standard and say, okay, I understand what that means, but look for, if I saw this situation, do they comply with the standard or not? That's something that is often somebody new to quality management systems or new as a quality engineer does very well just to go through as an entry-level course. And we can teach just a requirements course in 1 day if that's something that a company needs. That's what Desera can do on a custom basis, either virtually or come on site and teach your organization. Okay, that's the one question that was there. Let's see, what else do we have? 7 ways to nurture a high-performing team. First one, we talked about extensively onboarding effectively. Give them their formal training, give them practice with a qualified mentor, make sure they understand your tools and instructions, and then don't just turn them loose. Do as clause 7.2 says and evaluate their competence and effectiveness. I would go so far as say that this is like requalification for somebody who's doing an important job that once they're out there doing it, they need to, well, like to maintain certifications where you have to get continuing ed units. I haven't seen any audit teams go as far as tracking continuing ed units, but that's one way that you can recognize people is, what do they present? What do they participate in? How do they keep their skills up? Way number 2, diversity of membership. You want to have a high-performing team with diverse membership by making sure you've got the mix of knowledge and skills and levels and functions and all the different skills and abilities, because those people will come to value one another and lean on each other for those areas where they may be weaker. Useful feedback nurtures a high-performing team because you develop and engage your mentor auditors to actually be responsible for providing feedback. Your mentor auditors should be going over the reports and going over the audit plans that the newer auditors are doing to keep them growing and setting a very high standard. They can be critiquing the audit plans just to be sure that somebody is not going out there half-cocked and wasting people's time by asking really elementary questions. Auditors should be given feedback on their reports. Were the findings that they came up with significant? Did they write it up in a way that's verifiable? And did they do a thorough assessment of the area or just check the first few boxes? And then also we talked about using feedback from the leadership and also from the groups audited, from the auditors themselves, and continually improve your audit process and your audit team members' skills and abilities to perform audits. The next way is to allocate resources. Yes, I said, some of these things cost money, but in allocating the resources, it may be just a matter of getting it on people's individual performance appraisals, so their bosses actually see this as, oh yeah, once a month you're going to be spending a couple of days working on this or that if you're a mentor auditor, or once a quarter you're going to be spending some time, or yeah, I need to budget some of my training budget for auditor training. And those advanced auditors, budgeting the time for them to do that feedback process and budgeting the time and money if they need to go into training programs. Let's see, and make sure that that you get volunteers, that it's everyone's responsibility, not just, even if you're lucky enough to have a dedicated team of auditors, make sure that you get volunteers from other departments so that you get that diversity of voices on the team, and rotate the roles of who's leading the audits. Now, teamwork is one of the ways to nurture a high-performing team. An autocratic process where you've got a program manager who sends individuals out to work is not going to be as strong as one where the team works together. So I mentioned peer review, for example, having a monthly or quarterly team workshop, keeping the registry of follow-up trails, and looking at the lessons you've learned so that you can incorporate best practices. Like I said with Acquire, when you inspire high standards, you're more likely to get a high-performing team. You're not doing anyone any favors by accepting work that really isn't up to the standard that the team wants to be known for. If you want the audit team to have respect, make sure you hold yourselves to a high standard. So set the expectations from the start and then get feedback and discuss it candidly with the team. So maybe one or more of the internal auditors who aren't the audit program manager conduct some focus groups with people about the audit process and bring that back to the team. Also, you inspire high standards by making people aware of when work has been done particularly well. And there's some examples there on findings and feedback and follow-up that you could make note of. And when I say recognize top work, that means getting some of the management's mind share. Leadership, one of the ways leadership shows recognition is to provide resources. Do something nice for those. Allow, whether it's having that quarterly audit team meeting catered. If that's not the thing that's often done in meetings, maybe that's one of the ways that you recognize people. One of the best ways that leaders can recognize the audit team is to listen and to hold the people responsible for action to act. So when leadership participates in the program, provides resources, and makes sure that action happens, that's really what a high-performing audit team mostly wants from them. But I also say include a person's performance on the audit team in their performance appraisal. To that, I would say if you're the kind of company that has annual reviews are all done at the same time, the audit program manager could perhaps prepare a memo for each person that says how many audits did they do, what were some outstanding contributions they made to the team. Just simply the fact that they participated on the team is an important point to make, to put as a bonus on the person's performance appraisal. It might get skipped over in a lot of cases otherwise, and they should be recognized. And then for such things as somebody who's done a tremendous number of audits or had some key results that really saved the company, or who's been at it for so many, this is their 5th year doing audits or something, you may want to publicly praise people in like all hands meetings, things like that. Well, if you onboard effectively and you have diversity of membership, useful feedback, and you've allocated the resources, teamwork, inspiring high standards, and recognition, your auditors should form a high-performing work team. I love what Napoleon Hill said he's the author of Think and Grow Rich, written nearly 100 years ago, I think. And he said, it is literally true that you can succeed best and quickest by helping others to succeed. And that's what auditing is about. It's gathering and communicating information that helps our processes work more effectively. I also heard, teamwork is really what I want to drive home on this presentation. A saying that said, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go with your team. So I hope that what you take away from this presentation is the idea of you can have a high-performing, strongly nurtured internal audit team. And those of you who are participating in these webinars that we offer and so forth, I hope that you're taking this information back to your fellow auditors, and that you will get more people involved and raise the standards for what the audit team wants, for what the audit team can do. So I have the panel open. I've answered the questions that have come in, but now's a chance to ask any more questions that you may have. Well, that's all I have for today, everyone. And I hope if you have any questions, you'll shoot me an email or give me a call. And I hope to see you on our next webinar. Thank you very much, everyone. Bye-bye now.
On behalf of SoftExpert, thank you for the presence of everyone who participated in this event. If you have any questions, please contact the presenter via email. To see other webinars, ebooks, and white papers on this subject, please visit our website at www.softexpert.com. Find out more about SoftExpert solutions for enterprise business processes improvement, automation, corporate governance, excellence, and compliance management.